There are a few rules that I have thrown out of every single Dungeons & Dragons campaign that I have ever run. And today, I'm starting to wonder if maybe I was wrong to do so. Hello everyone, welcome to Key TTRPG. My name is Clyde and this is my first video. I started playing D&D about 16 years ago. And I've had the opportunity to run or play a bunch of systems over the years, but the players in my regular game tend to be most comfortable playing D&D or its ungainly cousin Pathfinder. I spend a lot of my personal time reading about tabletop role-playing games and adventure design, and as a result, I frequently discover new and interesting games, which I tell my friends about while they smile and nod. Eventually, I tucker myself out and somebody says, "That's interesting," and we just go back to playing 5e. This time, I'm not taking "Sounds neat, Clyde" for an answer. I'm setting up a one-shot with a few friends to give Shadowdark RPG a try. As I read through Shadowdark, I got pretty excited to play, but I worried about running a game with my players. I didn't just want us to revert to playing 5e with a different rule set. I mean, I know that there's no right way to play a pen and paper RPG, but I still found myself wondering, how can I make sure that our Shadowdark experience was authentic? Real quick, Shadowdark is an old-school D20-based RPG system written by Kelsey Dion. Her company, the Arcane Library, describes the system as old-school gaming modernized, and the internet has fallen in love. As I write this, as I say this out loud into a camera masquerading as your face, Kelsey's second Shadowdark Kickstarter, this one for the Western Reaches campaign setting, has surpassed $1.8 million in fundraising, and she's still got 10 more days to go. I hope she has enough inventory slots to carry all them copper pieces back to town. That was terrible. In preparation to run my first Shadowdark session, I decided to study both the game and old school RPG culture in general. I read Shadowdark's rules at least twice, and I consulted the boffins at the Arcane Library Discord, who pointed me towards Matthew J. Finch's quick primer for old school gaming. I recommend reading it. I watched a ton of videos from Kelsey and other old school game designers and creatives, and I researched the most highly recommended, best-written old-school adventures and hex crawls on the internet. I learned way too much to put into this short video, but it all helped inform my understanding of Shadowdark and the old school. I'm still a total noob on both of these topics, but at least I'm a little bit smarter now. Now, some of you are probably laughing at me, saying that I've done way too much work to get ready to just run a one-shot in a new RPG. And you're probably right. Trust me, you do not have to do any of this. It's just who I am, and I can't stop myself from behaving this way. But what, dear viewer, does all of this have to do with the rules that I always ignore in my 5e games? When I run a campaign in Dungeons & Dragons, I immediately throw out the fiddly and cumbersome rules for things like tracking rations, or counting experience points, or managing encumbrance, or the technicalities of overland travel. I just assume the PCs have a plan to feed themselves. When it's time to level up, I'll let you know. And if I think your character is carrying too much gear, it's probably because you, the player, are abusing my flexibility on this topic, and I'll tell you to knock it off. As we journey from the free city of Grimm's Cape to the southern shores of Ithias to challenge the evil Lord Malvir's false claims on the throne of Stormwatch, I'll briefly describe the journey, maybe we'll have an encounter or two, but I'm going to hand-wave considerations for things like the weather, the terrain, and any sort of orienteering checks. Or at least, that's what I've done up to this point in my game mastery career. In my real life, I expend a lot of energy figuring out what's for dinner tonight and determining if I have enough food or drink to get through the weekend. And I like food, but feeding myself is a chore. I really don't want to do that as part of a fantasy role-playing game experience, right? Right? A movement promoting old-school style play began in the early 2000s. In gaming circles, this movement is called the OSR, for old school something. The R either stands for revival, renaissance, or rules, depending on who you ask. The popularity of pen and paper RPGs really soared in the mid-2010s, fueled by pop culture phenomena like Stranger Things. But by then, the OSR already had this bevy of talented game designers that were turning out top-quality gaming products. Designers like Brandish Gilhelm, Matthew Finch, Joseph Goodman, David Black, Ben Milton, Yochai Gal, Pell Nilsson, Brad Kerr, Chance Dudenak, and now Kelsey Dion are developing adventures and game systems that speak to this old-school aesthetic and promote a certain kind of play. One that strips away the unnecessary and restores this vintage flavor that is now missing from modern RPGs. Now, earlier I said that I love to ignore rules for rations, experience points, encumbrance, and overland travel. Because in concept, any of these mechanics could be interesting, but in my experience running games for 16 years, I've just never found them fun in a modern RPG. So why are these rules even in 5th edition? Well, they're there because they always have been. In a recent video, Matt Colville of MCDM Productions said, 5e is weird in a way that other games are not. 5e is about preserving that 1970s design in amber, so folks my age feel comforted. Now, I'm not going to dive into the well-documented history of Dungeons & Dragons' origins and wargaming on its way to becoming the most recognized RPG in the world today. Others have told this story really, really well, and you probably already know it. These old-school rules that still exist in 5e are like vestigial organs in a modern RPG. They're no longer needed for the game to function, but if they weren't there, some folks would just claim, this game just isn't D&D anymore. And for that reason, Dungeons & Dragons is forced to tote around 50 years of legacy in editions that no longer cater to that style of play. To make these rules fun, we have to go back, way back, and get into the headspace of gamers in the 1970s. We don't have to give up our favorite modern touches, but we do have to integrate them with the old school. As Kelsey said, old school gaming, modernized. One thing I love about Shadowdark is the way that players manage their character inventory. In 5th edition, you multiply your strength score by 15 to get the number of pounds of gear that you can carry, and then you head over to Chapter 5 in the PHB to find out how much everything weighs, and then add all that up to see if you're carrying too much. In Shadowdark, you get a number of inventory slots equal to 10 or your strength score, whichever is higher. Most items take up 1 slot, some take 2, and then small items like gems or crossbow bolts allow you to store a quantity of items in a single slot. And I can hear you already. Cool, Clyde, Shadowdark's inventory management design is elegant and to the point, but does that make it any more fun? By itself, no, actually absolutely not. It's simply a different way to figure out how many mundane goblin short swords you can drag home from your expedition in the wild. But inventory pressure is a core game mechanic in Shadowdark, and it drives a lot of player decision making, and this inventory system supports it in a really, really cool way. I rolled up the Shadowdark version of one of my favorite characters of all time, a dwarf cleric I named Hogwash Holystone that I played in my friend Dan's Curse of Strahd campaign. Hogwash has a strength of 10, so he gets 10 gear slots. And after picking up some basic adventuring gear, armor, and weapons, his entire inventory is full. And that means that Hogwash can't carry any treasure back from the quest that we're about to go on. I guess technically you're allowed to carry 100 coins without consuming a gear slot, but I already have 23 coins, so I guess that means Hogwash can bring home a maximum of 77 gold coins, and that kind of sucks. Except that some of the items in my inventory are consumable, specifically the rations and torches, and we're going to need those torches, because no player characters in Shadowdark have dark vision, and one of the game's core mechanics is torch timers, which, by rules as written, burn out after 60 real-time minutes. As Hogwash and his friends explore the depths of the Goblin King's tomb, their torches will be consumed, and when the last torch goes out, the dungeon gets a lot more dangerous. You do not want to run out. Players have a limited number of torches, and as a result, they won't want to waste too much time crawling a dungeon. Take more torches and you'll have more time, but you won't be able to carry as much loot. As each torch is consumed, they'll be able to refill that gear slot with treasure that they collect from the darkness. Or you can risk abandoning your excess torches in the hope that you'll be able to find your way back out again before you need them. The same kind of mechanic comes into play for rations. Kyle from the Map Crow YouTube channel has a fantastic video about drawing your D&D world. In his video, Kyle reminds us that our maps should be treated as game boards, not as geographically accurate maps of a region or world. He says the primary purpose of drawing things on a map is to suggest adventure, to spur people into the wilderness to go and interact with the game world. I've made a lot of maps for my games over the years, and while my players like them and they helped me communicate their location in the world, they never served as game boards that led to more adventure. In contrast to my older maps, I made this one for the one shot that I'm planning in Shadowdark. This map is far from perfect, but it's a lot more evocative than the previous map that I showed you, and it's ready for use with Shadowdark's Overland travel rules. In Shadowdark, each hex is 6 miles across, and a party can travel across a hex in 4 hours. That means that they can travel across 2 hexes per day or more if they're able to pass constitution checks. In my one-shot, the players will travel from Oldwind Town to Peacock Point, an adventure location from Brad Kerr's adventure anthology, Wyvern Songs. On my map, it's 5 hexes away, by the most direct route anyway, and that means that it'll take them 2.5 days to get there and 2.5 days to get back. They'll need to ensure that they have sufficient rations and torches to make the journey, explore the lighthouse, and return to Oldwin safely. With this playstyle in mind, efficient parties may consider not just their own equipment, but the total inventory of the entire party. Why does everyone need to bring 60 feet of rope? And how many grappling hooks or crowbars do we really need? This mini-game of expedition planning emerges from the inventory pressure that Shadowdark puts on an adventuring party, especially when paired with an interesting map of the region for hex crawling. As a player of modern RPGs, it's easy to look at these OSR systems and modules and think these games are primitive and that character motivation is centered solely around gathering treasure for treasure's sake. And that can feel like a pretty thin excuse for a story for those of us who dream of cinematic narratives or heroic adventures. In a modern RPG, the character who's only motivated by greed is a pretty tired trope. I've played that character, and maybe you have too, and it's just kind of boring. The reason this is boring is that in modern D&D there's basically no compelling reason to gain wealth. Now this isn't a problem per se, it's just the way it is. And I'm sure that some of you track and spend your gold in 5e or Pathfinder, and honestly, that's kind of cool. But I'd wager that the vast majority of tables just don't bother, as wealth is essentially unlinked to most things that matter in the game system. In Shadowdark, and indeed in a lot of old school games, collecting treasure is how players level up. Why are we going into this dungeon? Because there is treasure in there. Now, personally, I'd still want there to be some kind of in-world reason that the PCs decide to explore some dangerous locale. After all, the characters don't know what a hit point or a level is, even if the players do. In Shadowdark, characters are awarded XP for finding and recovering gold, gems, and magic items, along with other meaningful trophies and tokens from their exploits. And there's a set of rules for carousing that allow adventurers to pool their resources to gain additional XP by spending some of the treasures that they've gathered. In contrast to most RPGs that I've played, Shadowdark awards you no XP for killing monsters. Monsters are obstacles. Random encounters are rolled on a frequency based on the danger level of your adventure location. And modern gamers might see these wandering monsters as arbitrary, but they serve a very, very specific purpose. They consume character resources like hit points, which urge the players to keep moving when exploring. Since you don't earn XP from killing things, and these monsters don't carry high-value treasure, it's in your best interest to minimize the amount of time your party is spending in a dungeon. And this adds time pressure and helps players and game masters avoid the debacle of the 15-minute adventuring day. So there you have it. In Shadowdark, torches, rations, and treasure compete for limited character inventory slots, which motivates players to plan their hex-crawling expeditions carefully. Because treasure and quest items are now directly linked to character progression, the motivation to seek out ancient artifacts and return home in one piece urges characters on. The one-armed man at the inn warned us not to go any deeper than we had to, but we still haven't found good King Milgram's mace. How many torches do we have left? What do you think, guys? Are rules for rations cool? That's a sentence I never thought I would say out loud. But hey, all of these were rules that I never really understood in Dungeons & Dragons, in modern Dungeons & Dragons. But they just seem to make so much more sense to me in an OSR system. And heck, they might even be kind of fun. I'm hoping to run my first Shadowdark session sometime this month. So wish me luck. I can't wait. And if you guys want to hear how it is, let me know in the comments below. This is my first video on this channel, and let me know what you think, and I'll try to respond to as many comments as you guys leave. Perhaps that's bold of me to assume that anybody has watched this video all the way through. If you guys want to check out my video game content, you can do so at youtube.com/ClydePlays or over at twitch.tv/ClydePlaysLive, where I stream about 3 times a week. Until next time, should there be a next time, be cool and be nice. Take care.